There's a moment that creeps in without warning. You might be mid-conversation, listening to someone explain themselves, justify their actions, maybe even perform for your understanding, and then it hits. Not rage, not sadness, not even a flicker of disappointment. Just an overwhelming, glacial silence where your empathy once lived. Externally, you're composed, your face calm, your tone even. But internally, something irreversible has shifted. The warmth you've always carried, it's gone. What shocks people, especially those who've never experienced this, is the realization that once an empath goes cold, they rarely, if ever, come back. This isn't a temporary mood or a passing emotional slump. It's a full-scale internal restructuring, a psychological overhaul that Carl Jung documented in his private work but refrained from widely discussing. He knew this change, though protective in nature, alters you permanently. If you're listening to this and something in that opening resonates, something in your chest tightens like recognition, you're either in the thick of this transformation or you're on the cusp of it. And before this metamorphosis completes itself, especially its final phase, it's essential you understand exactly what's happening within you. Now, before we dive deeper into what Jung dubbed the ICE protocol, here's something small but significant. If you've ever had that moment where your empathy just clicked off like someone cut a wire drop, the word frozen in the comments. No need for backstory. That one word is enough. Why? Because this isn't abstract psychology or an armchair theory. It's lived. It's visceral. And tragically, most people endure it alone, believing they're somehow broken, when in truth, they're finally beginning to protect themselves. If this speaks to where you are right now, consider subscribing to our channel. We're going to explore areas that most psychology sources are too cautious to approach. This isn't about fixing your empathy. It's about uncovering why it faded, what it's turning into, and whether you should even try to revive it. So let's begin with the catalyst. Most people assume that an empath turns cold after one colossal betrayal, one emotional injury that shatters them. But Jung observed something very different. The empaths who undergo this shift usually haven't endured one singular trauma. What they've faced is more insidious, a long-term, slow erosion. Think of it this way. It's not the earthquake that reshapes the land. It's the water, drip, drip, dripping on stone for years. You don't turn cold because you got stabbed once. You go cold because you've been bleeding empathy into a bottomless void for so long that your mind finally, mercifully, seals the wound. Let's put this into perspective. If you're an empath, you've likely spent years, maybe even your entire adult life, offering emotional labor nobody asked for, but everyone gladly took. You've been the translator of emotions, the space holder for chaos, the excuse maker for poor behavior. You've felt others' pain more vividly than they did themselves. And here's the setup. Every time you did this, you told yourself it mattered. You believed this deep capacity to feel was your superpower, that your ability to understand the people everyone else had given up on made you valuable, special, necessary. But here's what they never told you. This math eventually stops adding up. Slowly, so imperceptibly that you don't notice at first, the emotional investment starts yielding zero returns. The care, the energy, the presence you give, it stops coming back. Not just sometimes, every time. And your body, your brilliant, intuitive nervous system begins to keep score. This is when stage 1 of the ICE protocol begins. It doesn't arrive like a choice, it arrives like a symptom. Jung referred to it as empathic exhaustion, but that phrase doesn't quite capture the strange texture of it. Because this isn't simply burnout. Burnout suggests you're tired, but with rest you'll recover. This isn't that. This is your empathy beginning to short circuit. Imagine yourself in a conversation with someone upset, someone you genuinely care about. You do all the right things. Your facial expressions are tuned in. Your voice hits the right empathetic notes. You say what you're supposed to. But internally, there's a delay. It feels like you're watching yourself perform empathy from behind glass. What's most disorienting about this stage is that if you really, really try, you can still summon empathy. You can concentrate, force yourself to connect. But now, it takes effort. It feels artificial. And for someone who's always had empathy on autopilot, this is deeply unsettling. It's like consciously remembering to breathe when your whole life you've done it effortlessly. This stage, stage 1, isn't just about emotional fatigue. It's an identity crisis. You start to wonder if you're becoming bad, cold, selfish. You notice that things that would have shattered you 6 months ago barely move you now. Someone tells you a story designed to make you weep, and all you feel is intellectual recognition. Yes, this is objectively sad, you think. But that deep emotional fusion? Gone. Then the real fear kicks in. You begin to wonder, am I becoming a narcissist? Am I turning into those very people who drained me in the first place? You're not. You're not becoming unfeeling. You're becoming defended. Your system is protecting what's left. It's regulating the finite resource that is your emotional bandwidth. Because here's the truth no one teaches empaths. Your empathy has a limit. It always has. And now your body is calling in a correction, whether you want it to or not. During stage 1, something else begins to sharpen. Your awareness. You start noticing relationship patterns with stunning clarity. How many of your connections have been built on you absorbing pain that wasn't yours to carry? How often are you contacted only when someone needs their emotions metabolized? And then the reaction hits. The moment you start to pull back just slightly, people notice. The same people who happily took and took will now say you've changed, that you've grown cold, that you're not yourself. And they're right. You're not. You're becoming someone else, someone with boundaries. And to people who depended on your emotional over-availability, even the smallest limit feels like abandonment. Now, here's the trap many empaths fall into during stage 1. They try to explain. You sit people down. You tell them you're exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. You explain you're experiencing empathic depletion. You plead for reciprocity, for shared emotional labor. You say, I can't be the only one holding all of this anymore. And what happens? They nod, maybe even tear up. They say they understand, but deep down, they don't. And not because they're cruel, because they simply can't. If they've never had to stretch their own empathic muscles, if they've always depended on yours, they have no concept of what it costs to operate at full capacity. It's like trying to describe color to someone who's never seen anything but grayscale. They might try, they might be sincere in their efforts, but they don't really get it, and nothing changes. This is when stage 2 begins, what Jung called the great refusal. If stage 1 is a dimming, stage 2 is a retreat. Your empathy doesn't just glitch, it pulls back, withdraws, folds into itself like a sea creature into its shell. And what replaces it isn't cruelty. It's not anger or bitterness. It's something far more unnerving for the empath. Indifference. Not pretend indifference, not the kind where you act like you don't care. Real, cellular-level detachment. The type where someone you used to drop everything for breaks down in front of you, and you feel nothing. Someone tries to guilt-trip you using their old tactics, and you watch them do it like a researcher studying behavior under a microscope. The hooks? They don't sink in anymore. They bounce off. Here's what no one tells you about stage 2. It feels like freedom and terror in equal measure. The freedom is electric. For the first time in years, you're not tired all the time. You sleep. You stop obsessing over conversations, stop replaying them like a broken record trying to find what you could have said to make someone understand. You no longer care whether they understand or not. You say no with clarity, without explanation, without guilt. You stop doing the exhausting work of managing others' emotional reactions to your boundaries. But the terror? That sneaks in slower. It whispers, what if you've lost something vital? You begin to wonder if you've gone too far. In protecting yourself from pain, have you cut off your ability to truly connect? You look at people you used to love and feel blank. Not hate. Hate would still be a bond, just absence. What Jung understood, and what modern psychology often misses, is that this isn't dysfunction. It's adaptation. Your empathy hasn't vanished. It's reorganizing itself. Think of it like scar tissue. It's not as supple, not as sensitive, but it's stronger. And most importantly, it stops the bleeding. This indifference, it's not a lack of feeling. It's a shield, finally forming, not to shut everyone out, but to give you space to choose who gets in. That's the crucial truth of stage 2. Your empathy isn't gone. It's becoming selective. For the first time, you're not giving it to everyone by default. You're evaluating, measuring, filtering. And not because you've decided to be cold, but because your system has finally learned to implement the discernment it should have used all along. But here's the cost. You'll lose people. Some relationships will crumble like sandcastles under high tide. The ones built entirely on your emotional availability, they'll dissolve. The moment your empathy stops being an open faucet, those connections dry up. Some will react with fury. They'll accuse you of abandonment, of selfishness, of thinking you're better than them. Let them. Their anger is evidence that they were invested in your function, not your humanity. Others won't rage. They'll just disappear, quietly, without confrontation. And you'll realize they were never really there to begin with. The entire relationship was carried on your shoulders. Once you step back, there's no one left standing. But then there's the rare few, the ones who surprise you, who see the change and don't demand the old version of you return. They adapt. They rise. They meet you where you are, not where they wish you'd stay. Hold on to those people. They're the ones who saw you not as a resource, but as a person. And here's where many empaths get stuck. Stage 2 feels better than the endless hemorrhaging of stage 1. The numbness, the boundaries, the detachment, they offer peace. So much peace. You sleep better, think clearer, live quieter. So why move on? Because numbness isn't the same as healing. Indifference isn't the same as strength. Scar tissue protects you, but it also dulls you. Stay in stage 2 too long and you'll stop feeling your own pain as well. You become sealed off, not just from others, but from yourself. You stop feeling everything. And while that may seem like a blessing after years of over-feeling, it's not living. It's survival. And it's lonely. Jung warned that empaths who freeze themselves in stage 2 often become more isolated than the narcissists they were protecting themselves from, because at least narcissists enjoy their emotional distance. Empaths don't. They mourn what they've lost. They carry a haunting memory of how deeply they used to feel, how richly they used to connect. They mistake that ache for wisdom, but really, it's grief. This is why stage 3 exists. But here's the thing. Stage 3 doesn't happen automatically. You have to choose it. And most people won't. Because after the safety of numbness, letting warmth return feels terrifying, dangerous, like removing armor in a war zone. But it's the only way to evolve. Stage 3 is what Jung referred to as discriminating empathy. But I like to call it cold fire. Because in this stage, your empathy comes back, but not like before. It returns with discipline, with intention. It's no longer a reflex or a compulsion. It's something you choose, something you can direct, something you own. You feel again, but on your terms. In this new mode, empathy isn't a tidal wave that drowns you. It's a focused flame. You can control its heat, choose its direction. You're no longer a sponge soaking up every drop of pain in the room. You're a scalper, precise, powerful, and exacting. This is what makes stage 3 so powerful and so hard to believe for anyone stuck in stage 1 or 2. Because the idea that you can feel someone's pain without absorbing it, that you can care deeply without sacrificing yourself, it sounds impossible. But it's not. In fact, Jung believed this was the truest form of individuation, the birth of the self that can feel without fragmentation. How does it work? It begins with a shift in belief. Most empaths carry a subconscious conviction. If I feel your pain, I must fix it. If I understand your suffering, I must alleviate it. That belief is the very thing that has always made you vulnerable. Stage 3 severs that link. It teaches you to experience empathy as data, not a directive. You can know someone's hurting. You can understand their chaos and still not intervene. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Imagine this in action. Someone comes to you in crisis. In stage 1, you would have merged with them instantly. Their panic would become your panic. You'd start problem solving, absorbing, bending yourself to try and heal them. In stage 2, you'd watch them with cool detachment. Go through the motions maybe, but internally you'd feel nothing. You'd be distant, maybe even cold. But in stage 3, you're present, fully present. You feel their pain, but like a seasoned surgeon detecting a wound. You see it clearly, but it doesn't shake you. You can offer support without self-sacrifice. You reflect back their feelings without becoming the container for them. You're not fused with them. You're not cut off from them. You're in a third space, one that allows for real presence without emotional erosion. And from that space, something extraordinary becomes possible. Clarity. You begin offering people something far more valuable than martyrdom or detachment. You offer grounded, sovereign empathy. You hold space without becoming the space. You witness pain without performing rescue. You see people and let them see you without disappearing into them. This, to the uninitiated, will look like coldness, especially to those who knew you in stage 1. You'll feel like a different person, and in many ways you are. To people who were used to your previous self, constantly available, endlessly giving, the stage 3 version of you is confusing, maybe even threatening, because now you're present, but not porous. You care, but don't collapse. You listen, but you no longer absorb. You understand, but you don't agree blindly. You empathize, but you don't fix. And for those who relied on your self-erasure, this shift feels like a betrayal, but it's not. It's maturity. It's what happens when empathy grows up, when it evolves from an involuntary reflex into a deliberate act. Jung observed that empaths who fully embody stage 3 often feel like they've become a different species. They no longer respond to emotional chaos with automatic self-sacrifice. Instead, they transmute emotions they process, refine, and even return feelings in a healthier form. They stop being emotional sponges and become emotional alchemists. And that transformation? It comes at a cost. You lose the identity you once clung to, that of the endlessly empathic, selfless caretaker. You lose the belief that your value lies in how much pain you can endure for others. You lose the relationships built on your willingness to absorb chaos. You even lose the comfort of martyrdom, the quiet pride that came from always being the one who felt more, cared more, gave more. Stage 3 asks you to let that self die. Not with bitterness, but with reverence. You honor that version of you, but you also recognize that it can't come with you into this next phase. And once you cross that threshold, once you've tasted what it's like to empathize from a full cup, not an empty one, you can't go back. Even if you tried, your nervous system wouldn't let you. That old way of being? It's simply no longer compatible. Because here's what the ICE protocol does. It's permanent. It doesn't just change how you feel. It changes who you are. And yet, within that permanence, there's room for refinement. Jung believed the final phase of the ICE protocol wasn't the end, but the beginning of a lifelong process. Once you've reorganized your empathy, you can continue to deepen it. You become more precise in your emotional responses, more attuned, more strategic, more grounded, and more dangerous. Not dangerous in the way of harm, but dangerous to systems that depend on your overgiving. Dangerous to relationships that were never mutual. Dangerous to patterns that needed you compliant and emotionally available at all times. You become immune to guilt manipulation, immune to emotional performance designed to extract, immune to the games that once made you question your worth. That's the true power of this transformation. And with that power comes clarity. The kind of clarity that strips illusions bare. You see through the roles you used to play, the helper, the fixer, the emotional anchor, and you recognize how those roles were never meant to serve you. They were survival strategies, forged in environments that demanded your emotional labor without offering support in return. People will notice this change, and not everyone will celebrate it. Some will try to shame you back into your old shape. They'll say things like, "You used to care so much," or "The old you wouldn't have walked away like this." They'll try to weaponize your former self against you, holding your past empathy like a mirror you're supposed to crawl back into. Let them. Their discomfort isn't your emergency. Their expectations are not your responsibility. What they're truly mourning is the loss of access, the end of their unlimited withdrawal from your emotional bank account. You're not becoming cruel. You're becoming whole. And part of becoming whole means understanding that boundaries aren't walls. They're filters. They don't shut everyone out. They let the right people in. In stage 3, you start recognizing those people immediately. The ones who don't try to extract, manipulate, or consume. The ones who sit with your boundaries instead of arguing with them. The ones who don't flinch when you say no, who don't disappear when you ask for reciprocity. These are your people now. Rarer, yes, but more real. And with them, your empathy flourishes. Not in the old self-sacrificial way, but in a powerful, sovereign form. You're no longer trying to be everything for everyone. You're showing up as yourself, fully present, deeply feeling, but no longer depleted by every interaction. This is the paradox of stage 3. You actually become more effective at helping others, not by giving everything, but by giving intentionally, deliberately. You offer grounded empathy, not reactive martyrdom. You bring clarity, not chaos. You reflect, not absorb. And this kind of presence, it heals in ways your former self never could. Because now, you're not trying to rescue people from their pain. You're holding space for them to navigate it themselves. You're not afraid of their emotions. You're not consumed by them either. You stand beside them, steady, grounded, whole. This is what real compassion looks like. Not rescuing, not fixing, not disappearing into someone else, but witnessing them, feeling with them, and walking with them, not for them. But let's be honest, it's not easy to get here. Most empaths never do. Most stop in stage 1, endlessly bleeding empathy. Or they freeze in stage 2, convinced that coldness is strength. Few make it to this third space, and fewer still learn to stay there. Why? Because stage 3 demands more than boundaries. It demands trusting yourself in your evolved empathy, and in the possibility that you can care deeply without losing yourself. It requires you to rewire your understanding of connection, to believe that empathy doesn't mean entanglement, to accept that you can show up for someone without sacrificing your peace, to know that your presence has value, even when you don't absorb another person's emotional load. And that level of inner conviction, it's earned, not gifted. It comes from walking through the fire of stage 1 and the ice of stage 2, from questioning everything you thought made you good, worthy, or lovable, from grieving the death of the person who was always there for everyone else, but never for themselves. The truth is, letting yourself evolve into this new version means surrendering an identity that probably earned you praise, validation, and even a sense of superiority. Being the one who felt everything, who understood everyone, who never gave up on anyone, those things made you feel noble, selfless, special. But they also broke you. Because no matter how praised you were for your emotional capacity, you were still suffering, still being drained, still disappearing a little more every time you said yes when you meant no. Still convincing yourself that your pain didn't matter because someone else's seemed bigger. Stage 3 frees you from that cycle, but not without cost. Because once you're here, once your empathy becomes conscious, something else changes too. You become impossible to manipulate. People can cry in front of you and you won't bend if it's not aligned. They can try guilt, shame, stories of crisis, and you'll feel them, but you won't move unless you choose to. You'll see the patterns, the strategies, the emotional performances, and instead of reacting, you'll pause, reflect, decide. And that power? It's dangerous. Dangerous to families who relied on your silence, to partners who depended on your compliance, to systems that thrived on your self-abandonment. Because now, you're no longer a willing participant in your own depletion. You've stepped out of the cycle. You've chosen discernment. And most people, most systems, don't know what to do with an empath who refuses to be used. And yet, that refusal is exactly what the world needs. Not more martyrs, not more empaths who burn themselves out trying to keep others warm. What the world desperately needs are empaths who can feel without fragmenting, care without collapsing, and love without losing themselves in the process. That's what stage 3 offers. It's not the end of empathy, it's the evolution of it. Once your empathy becomes conscious, deliberate, and strategic, it becomes exponentially more powerful, not because it's bigger, but because it's yours. You're no longer reacting out of guilt, obligation, or identity. You're responding from alignment, discernment, and sovereignty. And that shift, that's what heals. When people receive your empathy now, they know it's real, not a reflex, not codependence, but a choice. They're not getting your emotional leftovers, they're getting your presence, your awareness, your boundaries, your truth. That's what makes it transformative. And it's why Jung believed the ICE protocol wasn't about breaking your empathy. It was about forging it into something indestructible. But let's not sugarcoat the process. It's brutal. It asks you to die to an identity that might have defined you for decades. It asks you to be misunderstood, to be called selfish, cold, even cruel by people who once depended on your emotional labor. It asks you to sit in the void between who you were and who you're becoming, and to stay there long enough for the fire to return. But when it does return, it's not a wildfire. It's a controlled flame, a fire you can carry, a fire that warms without burning you alive. So here's the final question I want to leave you with, one that you might sit with, journal on, or just carry for a while. What would it mean to let yourself go cold? Not forever, but as a necessary part of becoming who you're meant to be. What would it mean to stop pretending your empathy is infinite? To let your caring retract, reorganize, and rebuild itself into something sustainable? Because if you've made it this far, if something in these words echoes with truth, you're already changing. You're already in the process. And the world doesn't need you to stay the same. It needs the version of you that emerges after the ice. The one who can feel and choose. Who can love and still say no. Who can be presentfully present without being consumed. Let yourself be cold. Let the ice form. And then, when you're ready, let the fire come back. But this time, make it yours.